27% of dating app users needed therapy from trying to find love online. Not because they failed, but because the apps themselves destroyed their mental health. Right now, 38% of Americans aged 25 to 54 are completely unpartnered, and among Gen Z that number jumps to 46% compared to just 22% of baby boomers. But here's what nobody's talking about. These people aren't lonely, they're not struggling, and they're definitely not waiting around. They're choosing this, and the psychology behind why reveals something most people refuse to admit about modern relationships. Let's start with the reason everyone's thinking, but nobody wants to say out loud. Being in a relationship has become financially impossible for an entire generation. Gen Z expects to reach financial independence by age 32 on average, but 60% of them say a full-time job won't even let them hit their financial goals, compared to just 35% of baby boomers who felt that way. The economy these younger generations inherited is brutal, and 68% of Gen Z and millennials say the economy is actively hurting their ability to become financially independent adults. The housing situation alone makes relationships feel like volunteering for extra difficulty mode. In 2023, it was the least affordable home buying year in at least 11 years, and 31% of Gen Z are living with their parents specifically because they can't afford to buy or rent their own place. When 35% of millennials admit their parents are still paying at least one monthly bill for them, adding a relationship into that financial mess feels impossible. Brian Driscoll, an HR consultant, explained it perfectly. Unlike previous generations, Gen Z grew up watching their parents get crushed by skyrocketing housing costs, student debt, and a work culture that demands availability around the clock. They watched what happened, and they're opting out entirely. But money is just one piece. The real psychological damage is coming from somewhere else. Dating apps aren't matching you with people, they're matching you with depression. A Forbes health study from May 2024 found that 79% of dating app users experience emotional fatigue, frustration, or actual burnout. When you break it down by generation, 79% of Gen Z and 80% of millennials report feeling completely fried from swiping, and nearly 90% of all users said they felt the need to take a break from online dating at some point. But here's the part that should terrify you. 27% sought professional help like therapy or counseling as a direct result of their online dating experience. Over a quarter of users got so psychologically damaged they needed a therapist to deal with apps that were supposed to help them find happiness. People spend over 50 minutes per day on dating apps on average. That's 50 minutes of hope followed by crushing disappointment. When 40% of users report an inability to find a good connection, 41% have been ghosted, and 38% have been catfished or deceived. A longitudinal study published in September 2024 found that dating app users experience increased emotional exhaustion over time, creating a vicious cycle where the people who need connection most are the ones getting absolutely destroyed by the process. Riley Zufelt, a 25-year-old from California, deleted her apps and explained that matching with someone felt like a dopamine hit and she was just chasing the high of likes. When the search for connection starts feeling like an addiction destroying your mental health, staying single starts looking less like giving up and more like waking up. Between May 2023 and May 2024 in the UK alone, Tinder lost 594,000 users, Bumble lost 368,000, and Hinge lost 131,000. Millions of people looked at what these platforms were doing to their mental health and just walked away. So what happens when people choose to stay single instead? When researchers asked singles what they valued most, one answer dominated everything else: freedom. Not the freedom to party every night, but real freedom to pursue personal goals without compromise, to travel without negotiating destinations, to change jobs without considering someone else's career, and to spend money on whatever matters to you without constant conversations about budgets. One study from 2022 found that people specifically mentioned freedom from having things dictated by a partner, and even small daily decisions like what to eat for dinner require compromise when you're coupled up. Career focus came in as the second most mentioned benefit. A Tinder survey found that 81% of young adults say being single benefits them positively in their career, friendships, fitness, and hobbies. Single people are more likely to exercise regularly and often have lower BMI than married or partnered people. Singles also invest more in their friendships, and research shows that strong friendships reduce health risks like high blood pressure. But here's where the science gets complicated. The University of Zurich published a study in January 2026 tracking over 17,000 people from age 16 to 29, and the findings challenge the idea that being single is always great. Never partnered people show lower psychological well-being than those in relationships, particularly if they stay single into their late 20s. Extended singlehood in young adulthood was linked to declining life satisfaction, increased loneliness, and rising depressive symptoms, especially in the late 20s. But the University of Bremen research in December 2024 explains why this happens. Julia Stern, the senior researcher, explained that the differences likely come from selection effects, meaning certain personality types are naturally more likely to enter relationships while others aren't, and being in a relationship doesn't actually change your personality much at all. A cross-cultural study covering 6,338 participants from 12 nations found something crucial. Involuntarily single people reported fewer positive emotions and lower life satisfaction, but voluntarily single people had significantly better outcomes than the involuntary singles, even though they still scored lower than partnered people overall. That distinction between voluntary and involuntary is everything. A February 2026 study with 445 older adults who'd been single for an average of 20 years found that basic psychological need satisfaction, including autonomy, competence, and relatedness, was the most important predictor of well-being. Singles who viewed their singlehood as maintaining freedom and independence reported way higher satisfaction, while those who were single due to constraints like fear of being hurt experienced much worse outcomes. Researchers made an important point. Singles can absolutely have secure attachment because their attachment figures are friends, siblings, and family instead of romantic partners. The quality of a relationship matters infinitely more than relationship status itself. A bad relationship can be worse for your mental health than being single, which is why refusing to settle makes sense even if it means staying unpartnered longer. The cultural shift is accelerating fast. Hallie Kritzis, a licensed mental health counselor, noted that Gen Z is more likely to be single because they don't derive happiness from being in a relationship. This is a fundamentally different mindset from previous generations who saw coupling up as a necessary step toward fulfillment. Brian Driscoll summed it up. Gen Z is choosing independence, self-care, and financial security over outdated expectations, and they're rejecting the idea that a traditional relationship is the default path to happiness. Sean Leonard, a nurse practitioner, pointed out that many grew up witnessing divorce or unhappy marriages which fostered caution about long-term relationships. The percentage of women in their late 40s who had never been married increased from 3.1% in 1990 to 4.3% in 2010 globally. And that trend is accelerating. Pew Research Center predicted back in 2014 that 25% of young adults will remain single by age 50, and given current trends that estimate looks conservative. But here's what the data actually tells us. Pew Research Center found in February 2024 that 69% of adults aged 18 to 34 who have never been married say they want to get married one day, 23% say they're not sure, and only 8% say they definitely don't want to get married. Most young singles aren't opposed to relationships forever, they're opposed to relationships right now under current economic and social conditions. Right now, 41% of single Americans are not currently dating anyone and not looking to date, while 42% are not dating someone but are open to it. As of 2023, 30% of American adults are single, and nearly half of young adults aged 18 to 29 identify as single. This shift reflects economic pressure that makes relationships unaffordable, dating app burnout that makes the search for connection feel like self-harm, and a generation that values freedom over following a traditional timeline that doesn't fit their reality. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Maybe the people staying single aren't running from love. Maybe they're running toward something better. They're running toward financial security that their parents never had, toward careers they can build without compromise, toward friendships they can nurture without a partner monopolizing their time, and toward a version of themselves they can only discover when they're not constantly adjusting who they are to make someone else comfortable. They looked at 79% burnout rates, 27% needing therapy, 50 minutes a day for nothing, and a housing market that makes coupling up financially impossible, and they decided their mental health and their future were worth more than following a script someone else wrote. Whether being single makes you happier depends entirely on whether it's a choice you're making from a place of strength and autonomy, or a situation you're stuck in because of fear or circumstances beyond your control. Voluntary singlehood can be just as fulfilling as partnership when it comes with strong friendships, self-compassion, and a sense of purpose. The 38% of Americans aged 25 to 54 who are living unpartnered aren't waiting for their lives to start. They already figured out that sometimes the smartest relationship you can have is the one with yourself, and no amount of social pressure or dating app notifications is going to change their mind. They're not single because they can't find someone. They're single because they already found themselves, and that turned out to be enough. If you enjoy learning the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, subscribe to the channel.